Hi everyone, good morning, hope you're keeping well. Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be talking to you about some of the technology and the apps which you can use to kind of mitigate the so-called jet fuel crisis. We've got like an issue at the moment we have across many airports across Europe and beyond, with what's going on in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. So certain airports are saying they're going to run out of jet fuel within sort of 6 weeks or a couple of months, and various airlines have cut back schedules, and some of them have axed routes altogether. So we're going to kind of delve into that a little bit today on the video today. It's a bit of a blend between sort of tech and travel, so travel tech. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, something slightly different from the last one, with a bit of a different angle on it. I'm going to put the links in the description as usual, and I'm going to try and keep the video relatively short, because if I make it like long-winded, people won't watch it. That's basically my experience. So I've got the coffee here as usual. It's still hot today, that's a miracle. Normally I let it go cold and it's not as nice. Okay, so let's crack on. So look, there's obviously the situation, what's going on. One of the other things which is going on is for people flying in and out of Europe is the EU's entry and exit system is causing queues at or has caused queues at like a lot of airports, and some airports have actually suspended it now because people were missing their flights back. People were going away for 2 weeks, arriving back at the airport, within a 2 to 3 hour window, and then queuing for 4.5 hours to have their fingerprints done and all the rest of it, and then they were missing the flights back. So some airports have actually suspended that now. Okay, so what's going on is obviously it's like a kind of financial supply demand issue. So a lot of airlines are kind of cutting back the schedules. And I've got a bit of a list which I pulled together before I started the video. I'll just pull it up a minute, just bear me 10 secs. And quite a few airlines have actually cut the schedules, believe it or not. And it's probably going to continue in the foreseeable future. I can't see it's not a political video, but I can't see the war ending anytime soon, to be honest. And even if it ended at midnight tonight, the price rises and everything would kind of continue to affect everybody for months to come. So here we go here. So I've got my window open. I found it at last. I've always got too many windows open on my literally 15-20 at once. Okay, so look, these are the airlines which have kind of cut back schedules or routes and stuff. So we've got Lufthansa, the German airline. So they've cancelled specific routes, Glasgow, Frankfurt, ending May 2026. Mass cancellations, 20,000 short-haul flights cut. That's quite a lot, actually, to be fair. Fleet reduction, 27 aircraft withdrawn. CityLine subsidiary, so that's like a subsidiary of Lufthansa. Route suspensions, some regional European routes removed entirely. But so that's probably the most aggressive scale back we've seen so far. There are others. So Thai AirAsia is part of the AirAsia group, so they've cut capacity by 30% between May and June 2026. Route impacts, reduced domestic frequencies, suspended or cut some international routes, notably to India, by the way. So that's like a good example of like a low-cost carrier scaling back. It's hitting and affecting everybody, and some of it, I'll just take a sip of this minute. A lot of people I know who are planning trips, booked holidays, they're all a bit shaky, wondering how it's all going to pan out, or whether their flights are going to, you know, be cut, go ahead at all, or whether the return flight might be affected while they're away. So it's a bit of a minefield, to be honest. Okay, so in China, the big three carriers, Air China, China Southern and China Eastern, selective route cuts. You know, it doesn't go into detail too much, but cuts are targeted at less profitable routes, basically. Airlines are basically rescheduling frequencies, so, you know, not necessarily full cancellations right across the board, but they're kind of rescheduling and prioritizing, you know, which you know, flights, routes are viable, basically. You know, it's common business sense, you know. So Delta Airlines have trimmed the schedule, reduced the frequencies, paused some seasonal routes, domestic and international. KLM, SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, United Airlines reduced flight schedules. Yeah, it's quite widespread. It's not just like one or two airlines. So Turkish Airlines, grounded planes, suspended some routes. Evidence of route suspensions in Europe, especially where margins are thin. That means whether you've got a low load factor or high costs. So Air France, yeah, reduced growth outlook, capacity cut by 2 to 4% from 3 to 5%. That's what it says here. Not cancelling widely, but clearly pulling back expansion plans and future routes. Other notable impacts: Virgin Atlantic not cutting routes yet, but adding fuel surcharges. Yeah, that's something to watch out for. You know, WestJet in Canada suspended Cuba flights earlier in 2026 due to fuel shortages. European airlines broadly cutting marginal routes and frequencies, especially off-peak flights. So the big trend here is, you know, short-haul and low-demand routes are gonna, you know, face the axe first, if it comes to that. Regional and secondary airports are kind of most affected, so that's like outside of your big cities, you know, like London and New York and Madrid and Paris and stuff like that, you know, because there's less volume and people can get the train technically. Low-cost carriers are cutting deeper and faster. Long-haul growth has been delayed rather than cancelled outright, but each case is different, obviously. So, yeah, I mean, look, you know, but as I said, I've got loads of windows out there. We're going to be delving into it a little bit more, but the purpose of the video is basically if you've got a flight booked, or if you know, on the last video I covered a video about, you know, if you're kind of looking to book a flight. On this video, the angle is slightly different. So, you know, if you've got something booked and you want to kind of mitigate the risk of, you know, being caught out by a flight cancellation, or potentially, you know, if you haven't booked, you know, maybe not booking something which might be kind of flagged as high risk as being on the radar to be cancelled, you know. So yeah, we do live in uncertain times. There's a lot of things going on in the world. Okay, so look, some of the sites, like, you know, I mentioned this in the last video, like Google Flights, Skyscanner, Hopper, Flightaware, SeatGuru. SeatGuru doesn't exist anymore, by the way, it's closed down permanently. You know, you have to look at TripAdvisor now. It's going to, you know, SeatGuru is gone. But you know, a lot of these sites allow you to have like a kind of AI feature where you can, you know, set an alert to receive a notification if the price has gone up or down, and it offers, especially Skyscanner, like flexible route planning and cheaper alternatives, so you can, you know, perhaps select, you know, 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops, or different itineraries and stuff. Hopper, let's have a look at that, you know, because I don't think I covered that one too much last one. Your Google Flights is very good. I did a flight search on that earlier, and you know, it was via the Middle East, and it came up like travel. I'll put it in the. I'm trying to slot it in the video somewhere. It came up like travel restricted, airspace closure might affect the flights. So, you know, when I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, they were saying the same thing. You maybe try and fly Turkish Airlines. You know, it takes a different route, maybe not via the Middle East. You pay a bit more for that, and Turkish Airlines are very good, by the way, but you know, a lot of the Middle Eastern carriers, whilst they are very, very good and 4 or 5 star airlines, it's in that geographical zone where, you know, things are at risk for airspace closures and stuff, or flights being grounded for weeks potentially. Yeah, so look, I've got, let me just find this window. I was going to look at Hopper. Here we go. Yeah, I've got it open here now. So with this site, just bear with me for 3 secs. I do these videos live because I think it's a bit more kind of realistic. So basically with Hopper, it gives you like AI fare predictions. So the AI will kind of predict using historical data what the airfare is likely to look like if you're thinking about booking it, and from that you can deduce which flights might be at risk. So if you see like sudden spikes in the airfare in the coming weeks and months, then that means that the airline is potentially struggling to make ends meet on that route, on that flight, and especially if it goes via the Middle East, you're much better off kind of avoiding that, to be honest. That's called hopper.com. Hopper.com. So let's just click on flights, so a bit of an experiment. So if I just put in London, and it brings up all 6 airports, you don't have to put them in individually. Let's just pick a place like Madrid. Yeah, got it, MAD. So I'm just picking a date at random, so 7th of May to the 14th of May, not too far away, 1 passenger. Let's see what comes up. You've got to shop around with these things. I mean, you can't, because of the way technology's gone, you can't just like look at one platform or phone at one travel agent. You've really got to do your research, but like your monthly shop or whatever. Okay, so it's brought quite a few options. It says you should book now. We haven't seen a price this low for the past 6 months, so I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. In fact, the price is very low. It's quoted me $181 round trip, which is probably about 160 quid. That's very good, actually, depending on whether it includes the luggage and stuff. So that suggests that people aren't flying. And I've talked to people, members of the public and friends, colleagues and stuff, and they've kind of said the same thing, that people are just maybe holding off. So even if they've got the money, it's the risk, you see. It's the risk that maybe the flight might not take place, the return flight might not take place, or if they're flying in Europe and they're either on the outbound or the inbound, they might potentially miss the flight because of the new EU fingerprint iris scans, where you got to register your data in order to fly in and out of Europe. So there are these increasing risks, and add to that the cost of living and stuff, and it's putting a lot of people off flying, which is why perhaps airlines are either massively dropping the price or massively increasing the price just to try and make it viable. That is quite cheap. I mean, it's I'd say it's about 165 quid, 170 quid max round trip to Madrid, so that's pretty good. So economy, it says unavailable because on when it says unavailable, you got like different flights: 8 a.m, 6 a.m, 11:30 a.m. So the 8 a.m and 6 a.m are unavailable. 6 a.m is 274 round trip. The cheap one, 8 a.m, completely sold out. It's a good time to go, actually, because you can be there for like 9:30 or whatever. That's why it's sold out. It's a cheap price as well. You get later into the day, you're seeing it's like $316 return round trip versus working. So there are deals to be had, but you've got to be quick off the mark. You've got to book these things. You've got to do your research as well. A lot of these sites have like a little line, color-coded line, so it goes from green to red, kind of amber, green, red, amber, so green gradually to yellow, amber, whatever. You get the idea. So high risk is obviously red, green is book now or great price, and this is like it's kind of 40% along from good price. So what else of this, because all these sites are different, right? And part of the reason I'm making a video like this is because I'm trying to blend the tech, the travel tech, with the travel a little bit more, because people find those videos a bit more useful, a bit more interesting. You know, whilst digital marketing is the trade, and that's how the channel started, and it still is about that, you know, I am kind of just pivoting the channel just slightly. So not every video is going to be about travel and travel tech, but I am starting to weave some of that stuff into it. Okay, so let's move on from that one. Yeah, so Flightaware, real-time flight reliability. Let's have a look at that one. Flightaware. Here we go. Yeah, so here, real-time cancellation statistics. I'm just looking at it in Google, okay, rather than on the website, because you can see the different subsections like flight tracker, flight finder, browse by airport, and then beneath that you've got flight cancellation. So I'm just going to click on that, which will tell us what we need to know. So this is quite interesting. So total delays today, 8,815. So it's the 30th of April today. Total delays into or out of the United States today, 775. Total cancellations today, 304. Yeah, so it's quite interesting, and I think you can just delving into this a little bit more to, you know, so you can see by airline, by origin airport, by destination. So obviously the Middle East is going to be hit more than any other, you know, region and stuff. It does vary quite a bit. For example, you know, like Hanoi in Vietnam, 21% flights are cancelled, as opposed to, you know, Kunming in China, where 0% of flights are cancelled, although 16% are delayed. So yeah, it does vary. So this is well worth looking at, depending what you're thinking about booking and what you're thinking about going. It'll give you a bit of a heads up, a bit of a heads up. That's a better way to kind of phrase it, as to which way things are going and where the kind of pain points are. Of course, not every flight's cancelled, but certain destinations are more at risk, you know, than others and stuff. So especially in like the US, there's a lot of flight cancellations, like Miami, cancelled today, 16%. Where else? Yeah, it does vary. I'm just looking at the list, just bear with me. So yeah, you've got to be careful how you look at these lists, because it's by airline, by origin airport, and by destination airport. So probably by origin airport is a good place to start. So, you know, yeah, if you're flying out of Hanoi, that's probably best avoided. Let's just click on that. Okay, it just brings, you got to log in to look at that section, but yeah, well worth a look, and it's a very long list, by the way. I've literally just touched the tip of the iceberg. It's a massive list. You'd be there for like an hour, so I'm not going to spend an hour looking through it. But yeah, just you know, maybe, you know, if you look at it by airline, you know, so Flightaware today's got 2% of flight cancelled. Into Caribbean Airlines, 8%. Pakistan Airlines, 15%. Yeah, because it's in that Middle East Iran zone. What else have we got? So Bondi, yeah, 24% flights cancelled. It does vary quite a lot. Chengdu Airlines, 4% cancelled. As we go down the list, we see some of the other big carriers like yes, CAA, it says 40% cancelled. I'm just looking for the higher numbers, so yeah, sorry if I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking at the list and talking to you at the same time. So yeah, it's pretty varied. I mean, you know, Kuwait Airways, 3% of flight cancelled. Yeah, I mean, it's mixed. It's mixed. The issue is like the jet fuel crisis. You know, so, you know, a lot of airlines are kind of compacting the schedules. They're, looking at the less profitable routes, especially outside of like the big cities, because if you're trying to fly to, let's say, Newquay in Cornwall, and you're flying into London, then there's plenty of kind of ground routes by coach and train to get to Newquay. So it's not exactly a deal breaker completely. So yeah, have a look at that one. I'll put all this stuff in the description for you. Some planes burn way more fuel than others, so the ones that burn more fuel are more likely to be cancelled because of the jet fuel crisis, obviously. So yeah, I mean, as I said, pointing out some of the things to look out for, like massive price hikes, or maybe if a price seems too low, it's too good to be true, that could indicate that they've got a load problem with the passengers. So those flights could be at risk. Try and avoid like the hub airports. That's the way I'd phrase it. If you just want to kind of well, maybe I'll rephrase that. Don't avoid the hub airports, but just be aware that flights into like smaller hub airports outside of the big cities might be more at risk. So there's other things you can do. Choose routes with multiple daily flights. So for a good example of that is if you're looking to go to somewhere like Istanbul, there's lots of different carriers that fly there from many different routes. So if one airline goes down, then you're not completely stuffed for getting back. Depending on who you booked with. I saw something in the news yesterday. Let me just see if I can find it. It was the Ryanair boss was saying. It won't take long to find it. He was basically saying, I saw this in the news yesterday, that two of the kind of competitor carriers are at risk of going bust. Here we go. But this is not the first time Michael O'Leary has questioned Wizz Air's long-term viability. As far back in 2019, O'Leary named Wizz Air as one of the number one airlines he believes will be taken over in the coming years. But there was a comment in the news, yes, I've got it here, it's all over the news. So, yeah, Euro News, let's take this one. So, okay, this is what it says here. I'll put a link in the description as well. 2 or 3 European airlines could go bankrupt this winter, says Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary. I'm reading this off Euronews. So the outspoken CEO of Europe's biggest airline named Wizz Air and Air Baltic as among those at risk. Ryanair CEOs claim that 2 or 3 airlines could go bankrupt before the end of the year due to soaring oil prices. The outspoken boss has already, the outspoken boss of Europe's biggest airline said that the Iran war has already cost Ryanair, wait for it, an extra 50 million, that's 42.6 million euros in fuel costs in April alone. That is a hell of a lot, actually. So if you've got like an airline with like small liquidity, just kind of, think of a business just operating on minimum loads, in tick over mode and stuff, they're at risk, as would be any other business. If oil prices stay at these levels, 2 or 3 European airlines in October or November could go bankrupt, like Wizz Air, which wants to sue me, but won't have, not me, but Michael O'Leary, but won't have enough time to do so, and Air Baltic, he told the Italian newspaper. A good thing for our business because there'll be fewer competitors. Yeah, so we'll have to see what happens with that. And just below here it's got, Latvian, okay, it's not a political video, I'm just reading out the context of it, okay. So Latvian Parliament approves 30 million euro loan to Air Baltic. Earlier this month, Latvia's Parliament approved a 30 million short-term loan to Air Baltic to mitigate the negative impact of the conflict in the Middle East on the company's financial situation. The loan must be repaid by 31st of August this year. Yes, so where are we now? 30th of April. So if this goes on May, June, July, August, if they have like a bad summer, potentially they're going to be needing refinancing or be in trouble. Let's right across the board, it's not just affecting airlines, it's affecting other businesses as well. Other businesses are quiet. It's a unique situation, one we've not had before on this scale. Yeah. So, obviously Wizz Air has responded and said it's untrue and stuff like that. But, there's no doubt that, these costs are affecting airlines, and the costs are going to be passed on to consumers with higher ticket prices. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, isn't it? And okay, so let's just I've got another site here called AirHelp. Now this is like delayed or cancelled flight, get up to £250. What the site claims to do is it says you've got your rights when your flight is disrupted. We enforce them and handle everything so you get paid. So it's like an automated compensation platform, effectively. You know, once you've registered and stuff. It's quite interesting. It says AirHelp is #1 worldwide, won a number of awards. 28 million customers have been helped. So you can claim, yeah, I'm not quite sure, I've never used it before actually. So, you know, you can types of flight disruptions, flight delays, flight cancellations, missed connections, that's quite common depending on where you're going. Your 3 steps to compensation, this is what it says here, claim in 2 minutes. We make sure everything's quick and easy, and that's your data safe. We handle everything. We build a strong case to negotiate with the airlines so you don't have to. You win your compensation. The airline pays us and we make a transfer straight to your bank account. 1 fee, 0 risk, everything handled. No win, no fee. Supported in 19 languages, no paperwork, no follow-ups. So that's quite an interesting site, isn't it? It's a good example actually of how, you know, I'm always talking about the business model in all my sort of marketing videos today, how, you know, companies with a strong business model will succeed, because there's a lot of kind of fluff business models around which aren't really business models. People are just trying to rehash stuff, but this is, you know, somebody's thought about a problem and tried to address it using various tech and blah blah blah. So yeah, that's quite an interesting one. It's called airhelp.co.uk. So obviously I'm a UK YouTuber based in the UK. So yeah, if you're flying in or if you're living in the UK and flying out and you've got a problem with your flight, check this site out. It's called airhelp.co.uk. I put it in the description as well. Yeah, as I say, you know, without repeating myself, which I am doing deliberately, you know, I'm trying to just pivot the channel slightly, make it a little bit more interesting. You know, I don't want it to become like an all-out travel vlog where I'm just, you know, walking around shopping centres and stuff. You know, I'm not going to do that. But what I do want to do is just kind of blend a bit more travel and tech, and maybe just pivot over to the kind of luxury travel space a bit more, you know, and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I hope to take it in the coming months / years. I'm still going to be doing the marketing, but you know, it's a niche audience. You know, not everyone's interested in it, whereas by blending the travel element and the tech, you know, the kind of travel tech videos, it reaches a broader audience. You see, you know, people who might not be interested in digital marketing are always interested in going away on holiday or finding cheap, good value stays and stuff like that, and ways to mitigate costs and, you know, mitigate risk and stuff. So yeah, it does reach a broader audience, and that's the logic behind just trying to expand the channel out slightly without flip-flopping with the different niches and stuff. So look, I'll leave that there. I'm going to bung the rest in the description because I don't want to make the video too long. Do read the description properly. I'll put these sites in the description. Yeah, I mean, just, you know, shop around, you know, do your due diligence, do your research. You know, we'll have to see how it's all going to pan out when the war ends, if it ends this year, that is. But you know, for sure that there are increased risks with flight cancellations and higher costs, and you know, people have been more cautious, and you know, I think everyone I've spoken to has basically said the same thing. So look, take care. I'll wrap up there, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.